How many times have you recognized someone's face but completely forgotten their name? Now, this happens because the brain retains information much more effectively when it's visual than when it's in a written format. In fact, research shows that presenting information in a visual way helps us to remember a whopping 80% more compared to in words. And so that's why summarizing information visually can be a complete game changer for students' revision, especially in some of the science subjects. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you exactly how your child can use visual methods to understand, to boost their memory, and to retain and recall the information during the exams. Now, this is one of the best ways to remember everything you've learned. All right, so let's jump in. So why are visual notes more effective than written notes? Well, if we think about when somebody is writing, and we've all been guilty of this, I think I see a student, in class, or maybe reading the textbook, and they just frantically writing and copying things down. Now, the problem with that is that is very passive. They're not really necessarily taking anything in. It's just that act of frantically copying things down gives you a sense of comfort, and you feel like, yeah, I've learned something today, and this is going to help me remember the information. Compare that, though, with visual learning. When you use visual methods to summarize your information, it's actually more of an active learning process, and it activates both sides of the brain. So if you think about it, when you decide that you're going to summarize an information visually, you first need to stop, have a think about what is the information that you are trying to learn. So that thinking really helps with understanding. So it really engages that part of the brain. And then you can then translate that to a visual format. And then by translating it to a visual format, that then helps it to get into the long-term memory. So it really engages both sides of the brain. So for example, currently I am teaching my students about the menstrual cycle. And what I have done is I have taught them a way to visually remember the different parts, the different phases of the menstrual cycle, as well as the hormones that are involved in the different phases. So what are the functions? What are the roles of these different hormones? Now, you can imagine if you were just to write all of that down, you can easily forget. But once it's done in a visual format, you can easily remember it and retain that information during the crucial time, which is your exam period. So when you put information visually in a visual format, one, it helps you understand the information, and two, it goes into your long-term memory, whereas writing alone can actually miss out on those steps. So hopefully you can see then how putting things in a visual way can really help with memory retention. So just to give you an example of the power of using visual to summarize your notes, you can think of, meeting or speaking to an 80-year-old person, a man or a woman, and they could give you stories about examples of different things that's happened when they were 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, and they could give you those visual stories, but they might not be able to tell you the information word for word. That's the power of visual learning. Also makes me think of this quote by Maya Angelou, that people will forget what you've said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So that feeling is the visual. So that's so important. So that just shows how important visual is in terms of our learning and retention. Now, this video focuses on using visuals to help with memory retention, but there are many other ways that students can learn the information and retain the information and be able to recall it for their exams. And what I've done is I've put those different memory techniques in the PDF guide, and I've put it down in the description down below. So please check that out if that's something you want to find out more about. Okay, so now what are some things that your child can do to summarize notes visually? So this is the really cool part. The first thing is using images and or pictures. So instead of writing things down, so instead of making those written notes, students can actually draw concepts where possible. An example could be the heart. Instead of trying to write down the structure of the heart and the function of the heart and try to remember it, what if you put that in a visual diagram? So you actually draw the diagram from heart, you do that visually, okay? And then you can compare it to an accurate one to see, what you've missed. Okay. What about in maths? In maths, you could sketch graphs by hand, or you could turn word problems into diagrams instead of just writing them out. So you can see that this could be used for both the sciences and the maths. And this works because the drawing forces the brain to actively process the information, improving memory recall. The next thing we could do is we can draw flowcharts or diagram. This is particularly important for subjects that require or have a lot of processes like biology. So things like drug discovery, cell division, antibiotic resistance, and so on and so forth. So if we stick with the heart, for instance, you can draw a flowchart of how blood flows through the heart. So the different stages that blood goes through to flow through the heart instead of just writing it and trying to memorize it from written. Okay. And then what you can do is you can then transfer that to like an A5 notepad that you can use and revisit whenever you need it. The third crucial way that you can use visual in your revision, so visual to remember everything that you have studied, is by creating mind maps for connections. So this is really perfect for linking topics together in science and in maths. So for instance, in physics, you can think of maybe the different types of energy, and you can do a nice mind map about the different types of energy, kinetic energy, potential energy, and so on and so forth. Or in chemistry, where you have bonding and properties, and you need to know about the structure, and you need to know about the function. You can really break it down to about 4 different types of bonding. A mind map is really good way to do that, because it just helps you actively use your brain and actively think about what is going on between those different structures. So this process really helps students see the bigger picture. So mind maps is great for helping students see the bigger picture and recall how the concepts are interconnected. And overall, this method really makes learning and retention faster, more engaging, and far more effective. All right, so now, remembering what you've learned and retaining the information is fantastic. Once you've done that, the next thing that you need to do is you need to apply your knowledge. And that means knowing how to answer exam paper questions. So check out this video coming up next on how to answer exam questions for full marks to learn more about that. All right, that's enough for today, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.